my name's Rodda and I'm here with Bede, and today we're going to talk a little bit about your overall experiences with Sexpression Warwick, involvements, getting kind of like settled into Warwick as somebody who identifies as non-binary.
Yeah.
Is that good? Does that sound like what you signed up to do?
That sounds very much like what I signed up to do.
Excellent. Awesome. So I'm going to start with kind of a bit more of an obvious question. For listeners who may not be quite so aware, how would you define your experience of being non-binary, or what that is to you?
Well, like, generally speaking, I would say kind of you have the two binary genders, male, female, but then kind of the idea that that is socially constructed to a great extent, and also that you therefore perform your gender to an extent and kind of are told, well, this is how you should act, and then act that way. And then for the vast majority of people, that's fine, and people get on well. And then for people like me, they feel that, well, I don't feel inside that I am good at performing this, or have any desire, or it doesn't feel natural to me. And then you kind of go outside of the binary, and then there are hundreds of ways to experience outside of the binary. So I personally identify as gender fluid, which essentially means I somewhat swing between the two opposites, and some days I feel more masculine and some days I feel more feminine. The thing I think that is important to bear in mind is, essentially, a good analogy I heard was, it's like colours, in that you have kind of 7 colours of red, green, and yellow. But then in that you have like magenta, and essentially
shades,
you can keep going into colours and finding more until you have like hexadecimals, which there are like millions of, and keep going until you find more and more shades. So each person actually has a unique gender. But then you kind of just put them into groups for essentially mostly practical reasons, and so it's kind of just the idea that there needs to be more groups, but then also that that's not actually as destroying for world order as it's sometimes perceived to be.
And I mean, there's certainly that ideology around groups, labels and boxes, isn't it, in the sense that it can comfort some, but almost simultaneously at the same time constrict others. So like, therefore kind of diversifying that and having that's just kind of this multitude of space is really is what's...
Because I don't think there's much fundamentally wrong with putting a label on something, as long as the label is self-applied rather than you pointing at someone saying, hey, this is your label.
You shall be this,
So I see not a great amount of problem with me saying, I'm non-binary, or that if someone's like, you have to be non-binary, then I'm like, hang on a second. This
problematic.
Which obviously goes for most labels, but I do think, and then I also, there's obviously a great point you said that labels are a rallying point for community, and then obviously change and many good things, and as long as it doesn't end up being a box, I think the label itself isn't wrong.
I think that's kind of exactly it, that strength in being able to rally with those similar experiences, like kind of creating that community of support almost in those, like, you know, the labels may not be exactly the same, but similar in experience, as opposed to kind of a box shutting the rest of it out, or whatever. No, that's good. We're all about the metaphors this morning. I like it. So when you were because when we talked a little bit before, you said you came out, was it about 4
months ago? Well, this weird thing that you don't consider is you actually have to come out to yourself first, which is a somewhat confusing experience, because you kind of go, oh, everything that I've been viewing has perhaps not been right. And then also there's an extent of, I should have realised that earlier. There were quite a few signs that I was ignoring, kind of thing. Like, apparently not everyone adores dressing up as Belle from Beauty and the Beast. That's not actually a thing.
Best princess, side note, but
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I totally agree. But then you kind of have this, well, now I've come out to myself, where does that leave me? And kind of that's redefined my view of myself. So you kind of need to go on a bit of a self-reevaluation before you start then like being like, hey, this is how I want you to perceive me, kind of thing, to the rest of the world. But yeah, so it was about 4 months ago, and then so that was in the close to the beginning of the summer holidays, and then I kind of like slowly realised like, oh, this is where I feel, and kind of some days feel great about it, and some days you're kind of like, I don't want to get out of bed, the world is scary, and then
for sure.
But kind of slowly getting more used to myself in this new identity is an interesting one, and kind of, and then that's when other people being supportive is really helpful.
Yeah.
So I did get a little badge from the Pride Society that says, my pronouns change, please ask. And then kind of like, you're wearing that, and then people go, hey, that's really cool, and I support you. And then you're kind of like, oh, this isn't as terrifying as I originally thought. And kind of, mostly it's little small things, which I don't think people even realise that they're doing. But like, my flatmates in the first week were like, oh, hey, does anyone not have quote-unquote normal pronouns here? And then you're kind of like, people are thinking, and people are certainly changing, and
it's becoming slowly more instilled in the rhetoric, I feel. Or at least I hope.
So obviously you want like big sweeping political change. I could go on for ages about bathrooms, but mostly on an individual basis, it's the small things that matter. And to be honest, that's what my talk is more about, is kind of, hey, these are the small things you can do, which are not like drastic changes to your life or how you approach people, but kind of.
But like, and in that kind of like, you can, whether it just be a little bit about educating yourself, you know, like researching, or like taking that time to like ask and stuff, because I think some of the difficulty is that people are kind of almost so caught up in those kind of like those binaries and those concepts and stuff that they're like, I almost can't, I can't ask, like I'm so like, and then they justify that as a reason to not kind of try again, and that's not necessarily like, that's not what we should be promoting. There has to be that kind of like apologies if I've really messed this up, and like asking, but like I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is like, I mess up all the time. I spent 18 years of my life perceiving myself as a man, and so I always use he, him pronouns for myself, and then kind of go, oh wait, that's not actually what I want, but we're here now. Like, the small mistakes don't really matter, and what matters more is people actually trying and kind of considering. If someone uses the wrong pronouns, I'm like, I don't mind, you're fine. It's just that you even think you're using the wrong pronouns is good, because the first time you hear they used for kind of just one person, it is kind of weird. And my friend was non-binary before I realised I was, and then so I was like, oh, I'm starting using they, them. And loads of times I heard someone else talk and say they, and I was like, which group of people? Oh no, it's just one person on their own. Which is, it's kind of, it is difficult to get used to, and it is like a change in habits, but...
Well, because actively unlearning. And
that's,
you know,
which is difficult, but
it takes time.
It is kind of realising that mistakes happen, and if you're trying not to do the mistakes, then you're fine. You
know, and that's also what counts, like, definitely in that effort, for sure. No, I've definitely, like, felt like that when I've had friends change their pronouns and stuff. I'm like, I'd like, you know, I'd really actively try, and then, like, if I made a slight slip up, I'd beat myself up about it, and I was like, I was like, hold on, like, you know, and my friend was like, hold on a second, like, you know, you're being really, like, conscientious, like, and that's, I think, what, like, as long as you have that intent there, that's, like you said, like, I like that, and small things, like, will make a big difference, like, that's also the thing as well, like, they all add up, don't they, which is really, really great. You talked about your friend coming out before you and everything, and you said you did a bit of research, didn't you? You read a few books and stuff. Do you, like, have, like, any particular recommendations from that time, like, or do you remember all of the ones you read? Or?
So, the book I think that everyone should read is Girls Will Be Girls by Emma O'Toole. Emma spelled E-M-E-R, which is a bit
different,
But that is, well, I'm not actually sure whether the author identifies as non-binary, but it's very much about how performative gender is, and how kind of these ideas are socially constructed, and you don't actually have to think about it in a binary way, nor is it set in stone that it is binary. And then also it just helps with exposing kind of, oh, this is how I perceive certain things, and it helps you kind of become more self-aware. That's the one I would really recommend. And then Robert Webb also recently brought out Boys Will Be or was it Boys Will Be Boys or How Not to Be a Boy, How Not to Be a Boy.
Yeah.
Which I mean isn't specifically about being non-binary, but I think is very good for kind of again raising awareness of like this is what masculinity means. I think it's very good for being nuanced and it's not entirely like a condemnation of masculinity. It's like there are these very real problems which kind of just will exist until we stop making them exist.
Yeah, and the idea that like especially for Robert Webb, for that idea that it's like really like hard to like it was an active like he had to uproot like almost his childhood really in that way to like look at what had been like wrong with it and everything. So like that reflection I feel is like really valuable, being like, hey, like I've done this uprooting of this concept so we can all learn from it. And
exactly.
And no, that's one that I've got it on my audiobook list. I'm very excited for that one. I just thought that because like when you're talking about bits and bobs of reading that you've been doing, like I'm very like there are people who are interested in gender either just because of their own experience with it, and I think the fact that like literature is like becoming so much more available today, it's really great that it's like opening up that space and hopefully like less of a kind of like cis-normative like attitude to it, like so it's definitely becoming more popular, like I feel like within like our generation. Do you feel like that open kind of like attitude, do you feel like it's present here in Warwick? So since you've come out, and then obviously that was summer, you came to uni, so this is probably maybe even your first encounter of a big community with, you're now like, newfound, like, not newfound, but, that having that realisation instilled when you got here kind of thing. What were your reactions to it? Have you found it quite open, or?
It does seem quite open, especially on the small things, as I was saying. It does kind of, there is still the thing of, obviously, people still, as you said, having to actively get over their social conditioning. And so there is still kind of, I walk around and I'm aware, most people are viewing me as a camp gay man rather than not a man at all. And so there is still somewhat that. I could get angry about the toilets in the student union, but I'm aware it's a minority, but mostly I think it is accepting. Although, I don't know, it's a lot of small things like the opening language in I can't remember what his title is, big top dog who does the talk at the beginning of university.
Oh, Vice-Chancellor.
Vice-Chancellor, like the opening language is still a much ladies and gentlemen kind of thing. All these small things which kind of make it feel like, I'm still on the fringes here, which is, I think it is important as a non-binary person to acknowledge that you are a minority and quite a small minority. So I don't expect institutions to be torn down and rebuilt.
But you are a community nonetheless.
But that's what I'm saying, the small things do matter and do genuinely affect how you feel.
And how you see yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Because, I came here from a very conservative boys' public school. And so kind of that, it wasn't that it wasn't talked about, it wasn't considered as a thing, therefore didn't need talking about. Kind of everyone who gets here is a boy, so we don't care, kind of thing. And just then coming here, I was kind of expecting something somewhat similar. And then kind of people are accepting, especially, I think students are accepting on kind of an individual level and kind of much more ready to say, hey, I accept you for who you are.
Yeah.
And so that's good, but then kind of, as Warwick is a huge institution, it is quite hard for it to change, and I think it is, in a lot of things, somewhat stuck, but that's not to say I don't want to start condemning the university.
No,
I think it is a good, and it does make very real changes. Like it does have all gender bathrooms linked into the disabled ones, which are nice. And when you go in and you see that, I'm like, oh, this is nice, and they actually have thought and considered. But then it's kind of just some surface things are still kind of slowly changing. But I do feel like there is an effort to change, which I would think is definitely of equal significance to the changes themselves.
Do you think having something like a society like Sexpression Warwick helps with that? The kind of the fact that it's visual, you know, the idea of a society trying to make that change, open up that space where it can all things concerning sex, gender, and everything can be talked about. Do you think that that's possibly like a step forward that the university like should hopefully recognise?
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I think Sexpression is great, and Sexpression is also very good for doing sort of things like decoupling genitals and kind of gender, which is obviously a huge part of it, is kind of both destigmatizing genitals, and you can get your penis clay models and your vulva clay
key
models
rings and
key rings and everything, but then also kind of at no point viewing that as male, and it's an important part of the Sexpression kind of ethos and curriculum to, you know, for people with vaginas or people with penises, and kind of de-link women and people with vaginas, and which is again a small step, but it makes people like me feel much more included.
Of course, and it's the idea that any person can be in possession of one of these things. You know, whether it be a real one or a key ring, but it is that
kind of
idea that like reinforces it, and that like openness and inclusivity, which is what I think so great about it. You know,
I think it's really good, and Tabitha, who was amazing, the president, is kind of so expanding it, and I think as it expands and kind of as it does more within university stuff, I think it will become a stronger and stronger force for good.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will continue doing that, because I think it's really good. And obviously it does the teaching, which is really good. And my teaching of sex ed was quite good, like biologically, but socially, and kind of with any regards to social issues, it was kind of like, what, gay people exist? That's not a thing. Kind of.
And it can be such a, can't it? Like I was saying Sophie earlier, it's that idea of like being so blind to it and being like, how is this not included? Like today, like honestly, how do they get away with it? Like not being there.
I think so. To get somewhat personal and also intersex, which actually is not always a nice thing to talk about, but I personally often have like moments of dysphoria within sex where suddenly like I'll just hate my body and hate how it is when I'm having sex, and kind of that is kind of the part of sex ed that I think is a lot missed, is kind of my partner getting used to sometimes we've just got to stop, because it's like not actually like I'm going to have to take a break and like take deep breaths and kind of not break down, and kind of that element of sex I think is often underplayed, and kind of like this is actually an emotional thing, and you have to be kind of looking after each other.
For sure, like because there's a lot of emphasis on the physical safety of sex, like lots and lots, which is obviously very, very important, but like as is the mental safety a part of it as well, like, and like having those moments, and like, you know, Warwick is really trying to get forward and rally and strengthen the kind of we get consent idea, but the idea that consent can be withdrawn for whatever reason at any time, like having Sexpression, like, you know, because for what an individual like reason, like you were saying it might be, like it's incredibly important to just be talked about, because like it's so stigmatized anyway.
Exactly. It is just kind of the idea of there's more nuance to it, and there's kind of effects on both personal and kind of larger levels, and kind of making sure that we don't just focus on one. And then also I think it's important that the two are linked, and if people like start approaching gender in a less binary way, kind of then the big changes happen from the small changes, from like small changes in attitudes, big things change. Exactly,
and like have it, and it's that kind of like we were saying, those individuals, like, you know, those experiences will eventually, like, and their, you know, education and learning around them will influence more of the community change. So I'm so glad that Sexpression can like help like people outside of like Warwick and like within it, because like at the same time you may be educating others, but also everybody educating themselves, which is so great. But thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been really enlightening, a great start to my Monday. You know,